Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the backyard here in Ellensburg, Washington, USA. The local time is 8:48 in the morning, and we will begin our program on the Eastern Cascade foothills. What? At the top of the hour, at 9 o'clock, 12 minutes from now. Thank you for joining us. I continue to get comments and emails about how the first 15 minutes is a waste of time. Don't start until you're ready to talk about geology. Well, obviously you don't get what we're doing here. You're maybe unable to understand what we're doing here. But the part where you have to send me messages and suggestions on how I can improve, come on. So do you know what I mean by you can skip ahead 12 minutes? Get your granddaughter to help you. You can scrub ahead 12, you don't have to watch this part. But for a majority of us, we like to connect and make sure everything's good. We want to say hi to each other. Okay? My goodness. If you were with us last time, we were talking about green rocks with a special guest star, Chris Mattinson, and we will use, I had a couple moments of inspiration last night and early this morning. So switched up the plan a little bit, and we will be using Chris's knowledge this morning. So essentially there's more green rocks this morning, but they're tied specifically to two of the exotic terranes, one of them brand new to us. So, are we functional? Muffler boy. Hello, Sharon and Steve from Milwaukee, Oregon. Hello, Patrick, age 7, the Jurassic Coast, United Kingdom. Yuki and Saber and Finland, good morning, good evening. Another Finland, great to see you guys. The Finns are here. Marlborough, Massachusetts. We are 5x5, David, thank you for that. Philadelphia checking in. Phoenix, Arizona. Blodgett, Oregon. Portland, Oregon. Green Lake, that's in the Seattle area. Good morning. Red hat over there. Yep. Ralph, got those rocks from you, Ralph. Thank you. I just looked at those, so I'm hanging on to those till December. And got your email as well. Kyle from Virginia, another United Kingdom. Oh, the breeze is picking up on a very raw morning. Austria, hello, Richard. From Vienna, that sounds delightful this time of year, without ever having been. Sean is in Maryland. Michigan. Bill from Portland, one of the regulars. Calagero, what up, homie? Switzerland. Okay, Salmo, BC. I've got a few thank yous. Let's get on it. Looks like we're doing okay. Okay, a few thank yous. Scrub ahead, scrub ahead. From Australia, from Brisbane, Australia. It's from Kathy. There's something called the Australian, I can't read it backwards, Research and Space Exploration. ARS, or as Kathy has helped me understand, pronounced in an Australian way, As. As. Thank you, Kathy. So that package crossed the Pacific. This one crossed the Atlantic. It's from London. Do you remember, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, was it, that we talked about Karin Sigloch and Mitch Mahalanik? And we'll come back to those concepts, by the way. There was a reason. Yeah, we'll come back to it. But I talked about, I didn't know there was an actual bound atlas of the underworld. I thought it was just a website. So this is full of geophysics. My God, I've come a long way, baby. But there's great stuff in here. And Liz, you had a note, yes. Thought you'd make better use of this than I ever could after watching episode L. The author was a member of my local geology group at the time it was published. He gave us a talk on it, really good, and donated some copies of this book. So this is, if you're wanting to, so that's the author apparently, or at least the editor. So this person was in Liz's geology group. So I bought one and I cannot really make sense of it. I don't know if I can either, Liz. I've watched all your live streams since St. Patrick's Day, and I am London Liz, and I live in Ruislip, Ruislip. Nice things. Thank you, London Liz. Brisbane Kathy and London Liz. I think somebody sent this. I couldn't find a note. Couldn't find a note or anything. So if this really came from a viewer instead of just some random textbook company that got my home address, thank you. Thank you. If it's from you, a viewer, thank you. I got a few other gifts that I'm going to hang on to because I'm going to use them in some of our sessions later this month and into next month. But I do have one more. And it's a letter written in cursive, which doesn't happen that much anymore. Like a front letter from my mother. From Sheila and Dave in Chalfont, Pennsylvania. And it's a 5-page letter. I'll just give you a couple pieces of it. Dear fellow Badger. So one of them or both of them went to the University of Wisconsin, as I did. Here is a gift inspired by 2 of your YouTube episodes about Bing Crosby and the Sunset Highway. I don't know, did you see those? I did one in the spring with the live stream, and then there's one on YouTube from a few years ago. We'd like you to listen to one of these records, in particular from Monday on. See if you come to the same conclusion as we did. This song was likely inspired by the Monday morning trek down the Sunset Highway to Seattle and beyond. We noticed that the song was written by Crosby and Rinker. Again, you'll have to go back and watch that if you don't know what we're talking about. We hadn't focused on that before, but rather considered this take to be the grand slam of several takes of this song over a 2-week period. Our focus was on Bix's performance. It's simply stunning. Bix Beiderbecke, very famous in the jazz world. Okay. Sheila has 5 grandkids. I have 2. Sheila has 3 sons. I have, okay. Dave is a fellow Badger, having graduated from UW-Madison in 1962 in economics. Next, got an accounting degree at UW Milwaukee in '64. Okay. So thank you to you guys. So they sent a record? Like what? Like a CD or like some sort of audio file? No, they sent the records. Like I almost should have gloves on for this. Bix, Bix, Beiderbecke, and Bing Crosby and Al Rinker, I think for a time, was their after leaving Spokane, Washington, and driving from Washington down to Seattle in 1927, pretty quickly they got hooked up with Paul Whiteman, who was a very famous jazz orchestrator. And it's like, oh, that's cute. They actually sent you the record player holder from the 20s or the 30s or whatever. That's a collector's item, probably. Amazing. Well, they sent the records too. So these things are heavy. If you're of a certain vintage, you've never seen a vinyl record. Actually, if you're young and hip, the vinyl is back, apparently. What do I know? But back in the day, even into the 1970s, when I was listening to a lot of music and buying a lot of music, it was all on vinyl record albums. But I don't know, is this a 33 1/3? This isn't a 78, is it? I don't even really know what I'm talking about now, but My Pet Foxtrot, Paul Whiteman featuring Bix. Forget Me Not, also a foxtrot. Recorded April 22nd, 1928. Wow. 78, I see. Okay, these are old 78s. So thank you, Dave and Sheila, I think it was. I don't know, I'll have to figure out how to play these. I don't exactly have a record player in the basement that will play these, but I'll figure it out. I'll go up to the music library and get my mask on and have a party. So thank you for your very kind gift. It's 9 o'clock. Give me a minute, would you? It's overcast here. We got Muffler Boy coming down the street, and get my head right for just 30 seconds and we'll be good. But I'm going to check one more time. We okay? It's overcast. The sun's trying to come through, but I'm not going to move everything. We're good, Doug? Lorraine? Good. I'll see you in 30 seconds. Hot mic. A little brisk for Bijou, but let's see if he wants to come out. Hi, did you want to come outside? Oh, he's actually asleep. In the kitchen, getting some more hot water. What are we talking about today? Right. The damn breeze is picking up. That is a sour breeze. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session on the Eastern Cascade Foothills. And you're like, boy, I don't think I even know what we're talking about today. Well, guess what? I didn't either. So here's a little tell. if there's a super bland title for a session, that means that it was a few days ahead of time and I didn't really know what I was going to be doing, so I just came up with something generic. And as recently as yesterday afternoon, I wasn't exactly sure what we were going to do. I'd been working on a couple of new maps that I'm going to unveil this morning using colored pencils by Patrick. Yeah, so I had a kind of a working plan, not only for today, but for the next few shows. We're kind of at that point. But I had a couple moments of inspiration last night and early this morning, and so I'm excited to share what I have in my brain at the moment with you. And of course, we learn together, so I'm learning at the last minute just as well as you, or hopefully as well as you. So by now, this is a familiar looking map, and we really haven't added much to it in the last few sessions. Last time you recall, we didn't talk about exotic terranes at all per se. We talked about green metamorphic rocks and igneous rocks that give us some very specific clues to what was going on out in the ocean at some point in the past. We're going to use that valuable information that Chris Mattinson shared with us, and I had to watch the replay and slow it down and repeat it a couple times. You know, as we're filming, I'm kind of like half listening and half like worried about the technology, you know, and everything else, and shadows and mics and everything. So I had to kind of really, concentrate and listen to what Chris had a lot of information for us. And to me, digestible. I hope to you as well. It seemed like from the comments you really did enjoy what Chris had for us. So we're going to use some of Chris's content again today, but we're going to apply it to the map. So you're like, well, you're not going to talk about this whole thing again. Of course not. No, I'm not going to go through this all again. But just a reminder that we did, back in October, work our way across British Columbia. Quinellia, Cache Creek, Stakenia, yellow is Alexander, and orange is Wrangellia. And so these big, beautiful, fat, long, exotic terranes in British Columbia, at least at this pass, seem pretty digestible. And we did just a little bit down in Oregon and California and realized that there is some evidence, not everybody is convinced, but many are seeing that there's pieces of these blue guys, for instance, and even some Grello, Cache Creek, sandwiched in between down in the Klamath of Oregon and California. But in December, we're going to be cruising all over the place. But here in November, we're staying here in Washington. So if you've got good eyes, oh my God, is that all we're doing today? Those two little things? Is that just one thing? No, there's a couple things here. There's two different shades of green. So yeah, that's all we're adding to this map. These two little guys right there. So why am I spending a whole program on two little fragments of things that barely matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, A, it's more green rocks, and we'll pretty much be done talking about green rocks after today. And two, it's within a day's drive of this backyard. In fact, it's within an hour's drive. These exotic terranes today are as close as we will get to this backyard. And so I have a little bit more experience with these two terranes than I do anything else because they're so close. And yet, embarrassingly, I hardly knew anything about them until, this summer. So we have extra cozy fort today because I've got 4 field reports, all coming from moi, that's French, in the last few weeks. And regular viewers of the channel have seen these, but I'm going to grab little scraps of things, and I had something that was unlisted that I made public again, and I'll share that as well. I also have more stunning photographs from Gary. And you're like, I don't know who that is. Gary from Darlington. I can't even believe it when I hold it up and show it to you. Get the reflection off of it. So this is a beautiful gift from Gary, and I've gotten more information from Gary by email, and Gary's been emailing me a bunch more photos with his, hopefully famous now, yellow labels. In fact, he even has this photo for us that was my gift with yellow labels on it, now that we're learning some of these rock units and exotic terranes. So I'm reminding you, first of all, that Gary gave me a wonderful gift, but more importantly, I'm reminding you that we're going to just continue to use Gary's work in many of these sessions, including today. So there's a lot of visual component to today, so let's get into it. Yeah, we'll do it this way. This isn't going to cut it. We'll keep using this map, but we're kind of done with this map, to be honest. We're never going to color this stuff because it's buried by flood basalts. We're never going to cover a few other areas because of the basin and range extension and some other things. We'll add a few more colors, but the scale is wrong for us because the next handful of sessions, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 sessions, I'm not really sure. Well, let's say half a dozen, are all going to be in this area. And we are going to color these areas. And I've got the color scheme kind of figured out, organized by weekend, etc. But we need another map, don't we? We need a map that's more specific. Can we enlarge this area here? You kind of saw this coming, didn't you? I kind of had this in the back of my mind. Can we enlarge this area here and make a rectangle? And can we start adding colors this way? And magnify and really dig in to something I've always called the hornet's nest because it's too complicated to comprehend. Well, I'm trying with this session. So here it is. And you're like, okay, great. So my point is we're going to color this session by session. And I do have a couple colors on this, which I'm going to get in a second. But this is our, I don't know, I need another name for this. This isn't Mappy McMap. This is just a more kind of focused version of just the North Cascades. But there's obviously some heavy black lines, which are significant faults, some with black teeth on them, which is a thrust fault. And then there's some finer scale black lines as well. Those are boundaries between terranes, and we know that all these exotic terranes have faults bounding them. So even these thinner black lines are faults, some significant faults. But I'm choosing to grab a few of these faults and highlight them, magnify them, so that we can use them properly. Okay, so you want today's colors? The colors have to be green if we're talking about more green rocks, right? If we're talking about more green rocks, we need green for our exotic terranes today, right? I got all the rocks here from Friday afternoon. Okay. Drum roll, please. The North Cascades map. Oh, hold it right there. Now those look like familiar colors. That's royal blue, grello, and stickinia. So I'm really a tease this morning, aren't I? So before I reveal what we're doing today, please notice that the northern edge of our North Cascades map is what I just shared with you. Royal blue, Quinellia, Cache Creek, Stickinia, right in there. You see them? I'm out of hands, but you can see it, right? There's the southern tip of Cache Creek with the town of Cache Creek, British Columbia, by the way. There's, in red now, CC, the town of Cache Creek and the town of Kamloops. And this is the Trans-Canadian Highway, Highway 1. Cache Creek comes down, heading towards Hope, British Columbia, and then we pull back. Aha! Okay, so let me just freeze the frame for a second, give you a chance to soak this in. there are some familiar colors. Like, what part of this map is familiar from recent work that we've done? Like, this is old news to us now. That was 3 weeks ago or whatever. But isn't this familiar? Let me remind you, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. Let me go back and just kind of give you more detail. So I'm leaving British Columbia because I've barely colored much up there yet. I will be. Here's the international boundary, Canada and the USA. The red is geography. Can I read this backwards? This is Highway 20, Washington State Route 20 from Burlington up and over the North Cross Highway, Marble Mount, over to eastern Washington as we approach Washington Pass and Rainy Pass, Winthrop, and then on to eastern Washington and the Okanagons over here. I understand if you're watching from Austria, this isn't making sense, but you know the drill. We're doing local stuff, and I'm hoping you can enjoy the excitement of learning this stuff together. Here's Interstate 5, Burlington, Everett. Everett, this is US Highway 2, up and over Stevens Pass, Leavenworth, Wenatchee, and then Highway 2 heading over towards John Stockton's house. Interstate 90, North Bend, stopped to buy some cheap Nikes, up and over Snoqualmie Pass, Cle Elum, Washington, and my town, Ellensburg, before you head on to the east. All right, so by the end of this series, by mid-December, we're going to have colors for all these guys. And the complication, of course, is there's so much going on. It's such a complicated part of the story that I've never really had it straight in my head. I get so confused, and I'm not alone. It doesn't matter how much experience you have in geology, it's a confusing. Well, I mean, look at this thing. North Cascades. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, it's super simple. What, did somebody just throw up on this thing and after eating M&Ms? I had another one I wanted to show you. I can't find it, but it's a mess. So, I mean, depending on your point of view, it's a fun mess. It's a challenge. So we're going to work on this together, and I feel like it feels like I'm building slowly this morning. I don't mean to do that to you, but I also feel like we're going to be in the zone here for a while with this map. So this is our first crack at it, and I want to make sure you see what the plan is. The plan is to pick key bedrock units that we can follow easily, and a few features that we can use as piercing points. We'll get into it. And then ultimately, we'll use some of these bedrock units that we focus on here in Washington and use them more regionally. I'll explain that in December. So this should look familiar to you. This is from Burlington on US 20, or Washington State Route 20. And do you recall what this is, for instance? This is the Twin Sisters Dunite. Have you been there? No. Talking to me. This is the Nooksack. I was going to put Mount Baker on here, I forgot. Mount Baker stands right in the middle of this purple area. What was yellow? That was the Chilliwack stuff, right? Part of the Alexander story, coming through the Arctic. And the green, if you recall, was the Easton Metamorphic Suite, or the Easton Terrane. And it's green, so we are going to be talking about the Easton again today. I can't hold it, let's go ahead. If we jump across this fault, and that's our first major topic today, I'm going to talk about the fault first before we talk about details in the rocks, but I feel like I need to kind of hook you a little bit more. Is there any of this Easton terrain on the other side of this crazy straight fault? And the answer is yes. So this light green, Patrick, Here are the 4 colors I've picked so far for the terrains on our map. And your pencils are so fancy. Like this is, they all have names. This is malachite. I hereby declare that from this point on, the Easton metamorphic suite is called, the Easton terrain is colored malachite. And I hereby declare that moss green, a different shade of green, is our new terrain today. It's called the Ingalls terrain. And I had no plans on talking about the Ingalls today until last night about 6 o'clock. So the Ingalls and the Easton are chock full of green rocks that Chris was talking about last time, and that is our topic today. If I had to do it over again, I'd call this session Easton and Ingalls, but whatever. We're just calling it Eastern Cascade Foothills. That'll have to do. This is the map I wanted to show you again. There's lots going on. So, using the colors that we just had, already forgot the name of it. What is it? Malachite. Malachite for the Easton terrain. There's the Easton again. It's popping up in a place called the Cochise Lake Inlier. I'll explain. We're going to go there in the Cozy Fort. Notice there's a little bit of yellow, a little window of Chilliwack peeking through in this little window. I won't really talk about it, but so in other words, this story, the bedrock, the exotic terrain bedrock surrounding active Mount Baker, our topic a week ago, here are the same rocks down here near Cle Elum, Washington. Isn't that wild? And obviously they are separated by miles. We'll talk about it in a second. So you can see the malachite or the Easton terrain in the Cochise Lake Inlier, something called the Hicks Butte Inlier just south of Cle Elum. I mean, this is a half-an-hour drive for me. Half an hour on the freeway from Ellensburg to Cle Elum, then another half an hour on some dusty dirt roads to get up into the Hicks Butte, and I'm there. Within an hour, I can get to these rocks. And there's even a little teeny part of the Easton terrain in something called the Menashtash Inlier. Now, hardcore fans know that there's one more inlier, the Rimrock Inlier, that's west of Yakima, the Rimrock Inlier. I haven't put it on yet because I don't know what to do with it. And I've been emailing Bob Miller, and Darrell Cowan, Andy Miner, and others, and I think I need to email a few more people. I need to get as much as I can about the Rimrock. So I thought maybe I'd talk about all of these inliers today. I've decided not to. I'm just going to talk about the Easton on this side of the Straight Creek Fault, and then we'll leave the Rimrock for another day. But here, in moss green, is the Ingalls exotic terrain. Now, there's green rocks in the Ingalls, there's green rocks in the Easton. Let's cut to it. My gut says cut to it. This is the main message of today. 20 minutes in, this is the main message. We're talking about the Easton terrain, which is familiar to us from a week ago. And we're talking about the Ingalls terrain, which is unfamiliar to us, but it will be familiar to us by the end of this show. And even though there's mostly green rocks in both of these terrains, they are telling a very different story. In other words, the green rocks can tell us two very different stories, and I'm not going to try to connect these two at all. I'm not going to say that the Ingalls was forming next to the Easton, and I'm not. But I do want to stress that the Ingalls, so you just kind of keep this in the back of your mind, especially as we go to the Cozy Fort. I suppose you'll be sick of me talking about it by the end of this session. But Ingalls stuff is from an ocean floor. That's it. It's some kind of ocean floor somewhere. And the ophiolite suite that Chris was talking about last time are on display again. Beautiful. So there's serpentinite, there's sheeted dikes, there's pillow lavas, there's some argillite, and I'll talk about those in a second. But the message is the Ingalls terrain is a part of an ocean floor for sure, more than 100 million years ago. And the Easton terrain, which is already familiar to us because we were up around Mount Baker, you recall, with the frozen pizza boxes and the thrust sheets, the naps. Remember, one of those pizza boxes was the Easton, like a hat without a head. But notice these are different rocks. These are phyllites, famously the Darrington phyllite, green schist, the Shuckson green schist, and the Shuckson blue schist. So we're going to find these close to my house, even though there's a more regional story. Okay, so we're going to keep coming back to this concept. Okay, I think I need to do what? Right. So before we talk more about the details of the rocks, the green rocks in those two exotic terrains, I already gave you the main message. And before we kind of talk a little bit more about what we know about the kind of environment that those rocks are representing, although again, I already kind of revealed it. So I think 2 and 3 are going to be quick again. But number 1 is going to take us a little time. Because obviously, there's something we got to address. What is this thing? What's it called? What happened? Why are the Easton rocks here and the more Easton rocks here, why are they so distant from each other? Okay, I've been waiting to do this. So you know I have my fruitcake from Dareth. And the fruitcake that was mailed to me from Dareth in Madison, Wisconsin, from this bakery in Texas, is the analogy we've been using for this entire collection of exotic terrains, everything west of the Craton, essentially. And I've only got one green thing left. And this is the moment. Oh, and this is the moment. So you know that our fruitcake is representing this collage of different pieces of stuff. This red guy got sliced in half. I didn't even realize they did that. But to demonstrate the Straight Creek Fault, which is called the Fraser Fault. Is it Fraser or Fraser? I'm not from Canada. I want to call it Fraser, but I don't think it's pronounced that, is it? So you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut this green thing. I'm going to cut this Easton metamorphic suite. I don't know, can I do it while you're watching without it falling? How do I want to do this? I'll do it like, yeah, I'll do it like that. Daddy should have brought a bigger knife. Why didn't Daddy bring a bigger knife? Daddy dumb sometimes. Okay, now I'm not saying the Easton terrain is just a thin little sliver like this, although it might be, now that I think about it. But what I do want to show you is that once upon a time, as recently as 50 million years ago, hang on, Patrick. So before I demonstrate this and before I go more into the Straight Creek Fraser Fault, remember that our time window of discussion here is 200 to 50. We're building the fruitcake, aren't we? We're building the fruitcake between 200 and 50 million years ago. We're going to bring in the Ingalls terrain, we're going to bring in the Easton terrain, we're going to bring in the Chilliwack, we're going to bring in all those guys. Quinelius, Taquinia, you got it. Alexander, Rangelia, everybody's coming in during this time window. But for the first time, since we've started this series, I'm going to talk about something that's happening starting 50 and ending 35. You're like, what? I thought we were going to be in here the whole time. Well, we're building the fruitcake. We're assembling the fruitcake during this 200 to 50. But this Straight Creek Fraser Fault is cutting and then moving one piece of the fruitcake past another. Are you with me? When are we going to move the green rocks apart from each other? And the answer is between 50 and 35. Do you have it? 50 to 35. And we'll have to revisit later on why we know the thing stopped 50, why we know it started 50 and why we know that it stopped offsetting the green rocks 35. That'll have to wait. I'll say it now. I'll say the stop part now. No. Let's just finish the thought. Okay? So, as recently as 50 million years ago, the Easton terrane, let's just focus on the Easton. The Easton terrane is together. And it's been sitting here as a coherent green Easton terrane for at least 50 million years. It's been sitting here as a coherent green thing for 50 million years. But starting 50 million years ago, we're going to cut it with the knife like we just did. Oh boy. And we're going to have earthquakes on the Straight Creeks. I'm just going to say Straight Creek from now on. Sorry, Canadians, okay? We're going to offset on the Straight Creek Fault 20 feet at a time. Earthquake. And of course, I'm showing you a strike-slip fault. The part that I'm moving, that I'm shifting north 20 feet every time we have an earthquake. Yes, it's just like the San Andreas Fault in California, but this was the active strike-slip fault between 50 and 35 million years ago. The San Andreas Fault today in California is much younger than 35. It started 20 million years ago. So please don't be confused. I'm not talking about the San Andreas Fault, but I'm talking about the Straight Creek Fault that is behaving exactly like today's San Andreas Fault. And every time we have an earthquake on the Straight Creek or Fraser Fault, can't hold it, we're going to get the Easton terrane separated more and more each time. What does it look like today? The pistachio green Easton is up here, even part of it across the border in Canada. And here's more of that Easton terrane down here. There's no Easton over here. There's no Easton over here. This is a clean break. And if we truly want to talk about the North Cascades, we have to restore the Straight Creek Fault. Do you know what I mean by restore? Like this is today. I'm showing you the map today, right? And I just told you the dates that this green stuff and this green stuff got more and more far apart from each other. Terrible grammar. I'll do it one more time. Oh, I was like this, right? 50 million years ago, 40 million years ago, 35 million years ago, and then we stop. And it hasn't moved an inch since. There's reasons for that, but that's not for our series this fall. And yes, we know it stopped 35 million years ago because a blob of magma invaded this whole fruitcake from below, straddling the Straight Creek Fault, and that magma, called the Chilliwack batholith, by the way, no relation to the Chilliwack exotic terrane, is 35 million years old, and that Chilliwack magma has not been offset at all. So I just quickly verbally showed you, or told you, why we're sure that the Straight Creek has not been active in the last 35 million years. One last thing for us to worry about. But, just in case you're struggling with visualizing this, because of course the Ingalls is on one side, moss green is the Ingalls. Where's the Ingalls on the other side? Not there. So when we restore the Straight Creek Fault, much of this exotic terrain stuff here, and this is not going to match perfectly. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this is not going to feel as nice as you want it to feel. I'm talking about me too. This is not going to be restored as perfectly as I want it to be restored, primarily because of structural geology. Things are folded, things are torn by other faults. So this is not like the Grand Canyon where you've got these obvious layers and then you offset them somehow, and then if you restore the faults, meaning you put the blocks you put the crustal blocks back together before the faulting, you can't see everything line up perfectly. That's not the case here as well. We're going to restore this right now, and you're not going to see Ingalls on the other side. It's not, I would have put Ingalls on the map if I had it. If I had moss green to show on this side, I would do it. This is kind of moss green, but that's our twin sisters dunite, which is not even really connected to anything here. That's still a mystery. We still don't even know the age. Somebody said, why didn't you ask Chris about the age of the twin sisters dunite? He doesn't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Chris is a smart guy. Nobody knows the age of the twin sisters dunite. There's nothing to date. Anyway, I'm going to do something with another prop to restore the Straight Creek Fault, if you don't know what I'm talking about, and we do need a piercing point. And I do have a piercing point on this map. Maybe you already see it. And you're like, well, I don't think I know what a piercing point is. Well, if you were back with us in September, we had some Setting the Table episodes, and one was on strike slip faults because I knew we were going to be needing that knowledge. Let me remind you of what a piercing point is. Here's what I did in September. I took a cereal box, Special K. I have an ego problem apparently because I use this, well maybe I don't because I'm splitting my head in half, which is appropriate. But I made the point that my two eyes here are piercingly blue-eyed. They're not, but whatever. That's my little trick to help you remember what a piercing point is. I have two eyes, two piercing blue eyes. And conveniently, they're right next to each other. Thank you, parents. My eyes are across from each other. But if we take a utility knife and come right down the middle of my head, and we start making earthquakes on a strike slip fault, I'm not making mountains at all now, I'm not making ridges. This is totally horizontal, shifting. The two eyes are our piercing points. They used to be together, mercifully. They no longer are. And we can measure the offset. Excuse me. We can measure the offset on the Straight Creek Fault or on any strike slip fault, the San Andreas, take your pick, doesn't matter. We can measure the offset by measuring the distance on the tracer fault. We can measure from here, put a tape measure, go from here up to here. Those two eyes used to be together, they no longer are. We can measure the offset. You know what the Straight Creek Fault offset is? What are the piercing points for the Straight Creek Fault, and what is the offset? The offset's 100 miles. 100 miles. Now, depending on what you read, there's slightly different numbers, and they're using different piercing points. That's a nice round number for me, so we're going to use it. And I'm not the only one using it, by the way. 100 miles of total offset. Now, I'm not saying there was an earthquake that caused 100 miles of offset in one earthquake. No way. But I'm saying after hundreds of, I don't know, magnitude 7.5 earthquakes on the Straight Creek / Fraser Fault, we've got 100 miles of offset. Just in case you can't see it, the piercing point we're going to use is a thrust fault. I realize that some of you are way ahead of me, and I'm totally fine with that. You're smart. We've got a lot of smart people here that tune in every time. But you know, I like to involve as many of us as we can, regardless of our background. So sometimes the pace is frustratingly slow, but that's, you know that by now with me. Trying to catch everybody. So what I'm doing with this cardboard, and it is a prop, You can maybe guess what I'm about to do with it. I need a specific piercing point, like this green stuff, and this green stuff is kind of like close to each other, especially the Easton here and the Easton here, but I need an actual point. I need the two piercing blue eyes to restore. And that's why Ned Brown's book really jumped out at me with one particular map. You know, as I put these sessions together, you know the sources I have. It's all these detailed scientific papers, which I can barely understand half the time. There's these books written for the general public, like kind of photo books. There's the Roadside Geology series by Darrell and Marley down in Oregon, etc. There's websites, there's YouTube videos, all that stuff. I'm trying to use everything and come up with some things that I think resonate with our group and resonate with me as I try to piece this together. No pun intended. And this is Ned Brown, Ned from Western Washington University. This is his book that Consuelo gifted me. And we're not going back to the San Juans, but there was one map in here. I'm like, I've never seen that done that way. And Ned has been at this for 40, 50 years. I don't know. Never met Ned. The colors are wrong for us. This is our green mostly, right? San Juans and the frozen pizza boxes and the Knapp stack and coming over, and then we get to the Straight Creek Fault. But I'd never seen this. Is this the right one? Yeah. He says if you look at the windy past thrust and then you look at a similar thrust fault on the other side, that's a perfect piercing point. I'd never seen it done that way. And so we're going to use it. The piercing point for us this morning with the Straight Creek Fault is this thing and this thing. Now hang on, I know there's no Ingalls just south of this, and I know there's no Chilliwack and Easton this way. That's again because we're in three dimensions. There's folding of this stuff, there's older stuff knuckling up. We can't be that greedy. But I am saying that we have a major thrust fault with a bunch of green rock south of it, and we have the same thrust fault, according to Ned and others, with a bunch of green rock south of it. And we're not going to be talking about much more green rock stuff, by the way, in the North Cascades. So this works for me. I'm excited about it. And, you know, some of the folks who are emailing me regularly who are longtime geologists may say, oh, back away from that. That's not, I wouldn't do that. Well, maybe they will. But sometimes we're making connections that aren't common in the literature. And there's a chance that we'll actually help shape a little bit of future work in the North Cascades, if I may say so. So what am I doing with the prop? There are names, and we will revisit this. The windy past thrust, which forms essentially the northern boundary of the Ingalls terrane, which we haven't even visited yet, but it's coming in a second. And the Vedder, apparently Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam is a geologist, the Vedder thrust, which is mostly up in BC, but it does cross the border and come towards the San Juan Islands. Green rocks to the south of that thrust, green rocks to the south of this thrust. Ned Brown says they used to be the same. We're going to do it too. Damn it, let's do it. Let's restore the Straight Creek Fault. Huh? What? Cardboard? Like most props, do I even need to do it? Like, I think the message is clear, but I don't know. Oh, now I'm going all the way up to Quinella. Myra. So this is today. We're restoring the Straight Creek Fault, getting it back to the way that it was back in the day. Those don't match up. You know, you've already heard me. We got the Easton next door to each other. All is right with the world. As recently as 50 million years ago, this is what the scene was. This is the way it is today. So any work we are doing in the North Cascades, especially if we're talking about terrains that straddle the Straight Creek Fault, we need to mentally keep doing this. I don't know, I guess I'll keep this. I'll keep adding colors to this. Why not? And we'll keep reminding ourselves that that's one thing we need to do. But this faulting happened after the fruitcake was assembled. Okay, I think you've got it by now. Moving on to the other two acts, this will take, I think, 10 minutes, and then we'll go to an extended Coast Report session. Thank you for your attention. Going to the folders for the first time. Wow. So, yeah, that. So we were up around Mount Baker and looking at the Easton and the Chilliwack and the Bell Pass, and the Twin Sisters Dunite was somehow within the Bell Pass. Here's a cross section. I'm reminding you of what we did in the Western Cascade foothills last Sunday. And in cross section, I'm reminding you that those pizza boxes are thin naps that are thrust fault bounded. Please remember that thrust faults are the result of moving blocks of crust on a low angle fault, not a steep fault, but this is all review, a low angle fault, and the hanging wall of a thrust fault gets pushed up the fault plane. And I have to squeeze the crust to send these blocks, these naps, these thrust sheets coming up the back side. And the windy pass thrust and the Vetter thrust, same idea. And I'm not going to talk about those because we don't know what the footwall of those thrust faults are yet. That's coming in sessions down the road. But if we get to the actual rocks, I'll quickly review what we know about the Easton, and we'll break new ground finally because you've been patiently waiting for the Ingalls rocks, even though I told you a little bit about it. Well, here's something I drew for myself this summer before I really knew about the windy pass thrust or the Vetter thrust. But I'm showing this to you. Oh, good. We got power tools going. Nice. Hopefully you can't hear it. Look at this collection of rocks, most of them green, but there's other stuff that we're ignoring today south of Cle Elum. I'm just showing you the green rock variation in the Easton terrain. I swear there's a neighborhood newsletter. It's like, here are the times to use power tools. Sunday mornings, 9:30, Friday afternoons too. God bless them, they're out doing wholesome things with their yard, trying to improve the neighborhood. That's the mature approach. So you remember the green rocks look like this, the Constitution/Lopez terrain in the San Juans, and there's our age window, and there are some of the rocks involved. I'm reminding you that the Easton, one of the two terrains for us today, same time window, the Darrington phyllite, the Shuckson blue schist, the Shuckson green schist, and I added this morning. I'm reminding you now that that's all subduction zone rock that Chris was helping us understand last time. Well, how about the Ingalls? Those are green rocks. What was the difference? The difference is once we get to the Ingalls terrain, we're no longer talking about a subduction zone. We're talking about rocks within an ophiolite sequence. And ophiolites, if you hear the word ophiolite from this point forward, think ocean floor. Not a trench, maybe not even a spreading ridge. There's kind of some new ideas to explain ophiolites, as Chris was discussing with me after we shut the cameras off on Friday. Pretty sure everybody agrees that with an ophiolite sequence, you need massive amounts of pulling the crust apart to explain those sheeted dikes and other things like that. But the new idea, I guess called suprasubduction, is that even correct? I shouldn't even have said it because I'm not sure. But the new idea is there's massive amounts of extension in the ocean floor to create an ophiolite sequence, but we're not at the actual plate boundary. We're not actually at a spreading ridge, which was the old idea. The new idea with an ophiolite, as I understand it from Chris and others, is that you just have a fracture zone. Have you ever looked at a map of the ocean floors of the world? There's all these offset fractures, or fractures that offset. There's fractures on the ocean floor, big ones. And the thought is you kind of exploit one of those fractures and you do massive amounts of extension and you create a bunch of new ocean floor rock out there in the middle of the ocean. Not necessarily tied to a plate boundary. Regardless, our Ingalls, oh boy. Our Ingalls terrain is in the ballpark, isn't it? It's another postage stamp on these strat columns. We can agree a little bit older, entirely within the Jurassic period. But again, we're looking at rocks of an ophiolite sequence and not rocks of a subduction zone. Oh, I got the wrong page. Sorry. There. Easton, Ingalls. Green rocks, not the same environment. You've got it now. All right. I feel like I want to go to the Cozy Fort, but before we do, what do I have in the third folder here? Not much, I don't think. Oh yeah, just notes for myself, reminding myself and then maybe you that the Ingalls is this ophiolite sequence. Oh, I do have something else that's important. More coming on this in a second, but here's our ocean floor. And then from Chris's work last time, and that's why I hit that so hard, we started out, do you remember? I said, which rocks are from a subduction zone? Because I knew we were talking about the Easton today. And so I think I saw Ivana. Ivana, I don't know, I still don't understand your story. You're some sort of savant. Like, do you have any geology training at all? I'm not sure you do. You're in Brooklyn? But I saw you write some comments like, wow. And I think you heard something from Chris that I'm not sure I heard. Was Chris, and this is through Ivana's interpretation now, was Chris saying that the blue schists are more common when you have very old ocean crust, which is therefore cold and sinks more easily or fast? Are blue schists more likely to happen with old cold slabs subducting, and are green schists more common with younger ocean crust? And you're like, why would you have ocean crust of different ages? Well, it depends on how far you are okay? Am I framed up? Can you see what I'm doing? So the idea is, and maybe I'm hitting this too hard and it's not really what Chris was saying, but I'm going to do it anyway. Here's a spreading ridge, a divergent plate boundary out in the ocean somewhere. I'm not saying now that we're off the coast of North America. I'm just saying generically in the globe, on the globe. And look at the distance between this spreading ridge and the place where the ocean floor subducts back into the earth. And remember from the episode on Karin Siglok, this stuff doesn't go away. It continues as a deep slab going all the way to the lower mantle, but that's another topic, right? My point is, as this ocean crust gets farther and farther away from the ocean crust maker, and that's what this is. This is like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge or the East Pacific Rise. It's hot here, and we're making hot new rock that's going to cool off. But the concept is, I think this is backed up with, that as this ocean crust gets moved farther and farther away from where it was created, it gets colder and colder. It's like this is the oven, and this slab is getting farther and farther away from the oven until, if there's a long travel distance between the creation of the ocean crust and where it gets subducted, it's going to be far older and colder than a spreading situation here, where the distance between the oven and the subduction zone is shorter. Therefore, we're going to have younger and therefore warmer ocean floor that's going to subduct. Is there a possible signature on what type of schist is created in the subduction zone? Because the green schist and the blue schist were originally basalt on the ocean floor. Okay. So, Ivana, if you steered us in that direction, and Chris, hear from Chris tomorrow, and he's like, yeah, you're right on the mark with that, then I'll feel good. If Chris comes down the hall walking towards me with kind of this look on his face like, what are you, then we were wrong. Okay. The last thing I just remembered that I do know, oh boy, did it blow away? Hang on, Patrick. I had a more detailed I really want to show you this, so give me another second. Here it is. Got it. So from reading the comments from Chris's show, I think one of the memorable moments is when Chris gave me that look down the microscope, and we were, So here are some actual photo micrographs. We're back to the Easton now. This is the subduction zone, phyllites and green schists and blue schists. And we're about to go in the Cozy Fort where we'll see a bunch of these rocks in the flesh. But if we jump then, I know this is confusing, if we jump from the Easton, subduction, to the Ingalls, ocean floor, right? This is from a good paper by Jamie McDonald. I heard from him just a little bit this week by email. He's the guy at Florida Atlantic University, I think. Jamie McDonald has done a lot of work on these green rocks and other exotic terrain rocks here in Washington. But this paper in 2008, which is the Geological Society of America Special Paper 438, entitled The Ingalls Ophiolite Complex, we're about to look at real video clips and photos of the details in this Ingalls Ophiolite complex. And I was going to draw this all out on the chalkboard, but I thought, these are basically my notes, and I just colored them up for our use. I was running out of time last night. I'm going to try to read backwards. A majority of the ophiolite complex, so this is like almost a complete ophiolite sequence, meaning almost a complete section of the subflooring of the Pacific Ocean floor more than 100 million years ago. The most complete ophiolite complex in Washington, at least. And much of it is this kind of serpentinite, which we'll see a bunch of in the Cozy Fort, melange mix. It's kind of a jumbled mix of blocks and things, and there's some ribbon cherts that are blocked, incorporated in that. I guess it was Jamie interpreting that maybe some of these are blocks of old seamounts. Remember those huge oceanic plateaus that we were talking about? Or maybe not that big, maybe just a seamount, like a regular seamount tied to the Yellowstone, or like today's Hawaiian Emperor seamount chain. But the point is we have a jumbled mix of, We have a jumbled mess and a mix of serpentinite and other distinct blocks, and you'll get a sense of that chaotic nature of this portion of the ophiolite sequence. And then I remember one of you had a live question for Chris on Friday saying, are there any sheeted dikes in Washington? And according to Jamie's work, there are some beautiful sheeted dikes in the in the Ingalls, which is just 45 minutes away from here on US 97, north of Blewett Pass. But that didn't come to Chris's mind at the moment. That's fine. Some dates, some high precision uranium lead dates coming from different portions of the Ingalls. There's some pillow basalts that are more greenish now than they are the original basalt. And then there is some argillite, which is basically mud that turns into shale, which turns into slate, which turns into argillite. So you just add temperature and pressure, keep adding temperature and pressure, and you eventually come up with some argillite. And that's, quote unquote, the top of this ophiolite sequence. And what does this say? Oh yeah. So at least Jamie and maybe others are wondering, if you look at the details of the shale in the argillite, was there possibly some sort of oceanic island arc nearby at the time? So instead of, is this ocean floor that's out truly by itself? Or is this ocean floor that's next door to some sort of island arc? And if it's an island arc, does that mean, oh boy, what? Green bean, string bean, Stachynia, Quinellia? I'd love to make correlations like that, but I also want to be true to the science that's been done to this point. I don't want to connect dots that should not be connected at this point, and nobody knows. We're about to go into the cozy fort. It's the top of the hour. Ding! Chime. Top of the hour. I don't know. So we're going to Burlington Hill to look at a couple of video clips and some photos. Serpentinite from the Easton suite, subduction zone. Thank you, Steve. I took some of that green schist / blue schist and whacked on it with a hammer this morning. That was an interesting experience at 35-degree temperatures out here. But I wanted to give you a sense of kind of the layered nature. I don't know, should we flip around? You're going to see better photos. Oh, I forgot to, I'm going to show you some photos in a second. I forgot to remind myself who sent the photos. I'm sorry. Wow. So, green schist, layered, and you'll see a bunch of the layers momentarily. And then the whole reason for doing this before we're in the cozy fort, more green rocks, but now, can you go? Can you leave the Easton, which is subduction? Can you go to the Ingalls, which is ocean floor? So, serpentinite, ocean floor, not subduction at all, as I understand it. Now that I say that, there is serpentinite with, okay. Anyway, the Ingalls is representing an ocean floor situation. And one of the short video clips will feature this guy, which I brought home with me from that day. This is a hot day in July. But you'll see one of the field reports featuring this guy right here. Serpentinite. Ocean floor. Okay. We're going to start, I can't remember. Cozy Fort by Steve. Give me a second to get set up, please. Oh, power tool boy, just got him fired up, and maybe he heard me complaining. I don't know. Eric, neighbor. We're all friends. We're all friends. All right, I don't need my hat anymore. Kathy, I'm going into the fort with you guys. Not exactly warm out, and I don't know, maybe the battery life will dictate how long we go here, but I got a lot for you. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Let me mute. Oh, man. We're going to feature photos from Gary coming in just a second. I've got the email open here, so let me read this to you. I basically, Gary, the guy that sent me the beautiful big photo from the mountains, I basically said, Gary, can you tell me more about your history with the U.S. Forest Service? I think our viewers might be interested because we're going to continue to feature some of your photos, which are amazing. Gary says, thanks for asking. For most of the last 30 years of my U.S. Forest Service career, I coordinated the trail maintenance and construction program on the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. I was fortunate to spend much of my time in the field between Mount Rainier and Canada. I was always seeking out opportunities to find funding from various sources to fund improvements and repair work on the trail system on the forest. Funds would then go into contracts for the work or agreements with third parties to do this. My favorite part of the job was plotting and scheming with partner organizations such as Washington Trails Association, Backcountry Horsemen of Washington, and many others to leverage work on the trails. I was also the lead person on managing the wilderness areas, which included working with advocates for new wilderness areas and facilitating various projects in the wilderness areas. I was fortunate to help out folks from the U.S. Geological Survey and the Northwest Seismic Network on their projects. I helped Basil Teakoff from the University of Wisconsin get a permit for work on the Twin Sisters Range. Have you been there before? Probably a dozen years ago, too. Anyway, something new would come in the door every day. Nature would throw floods, down trees, and loose rocks on our way, and it was incredibly satisfying work. I spent the first 11 seasons of my career in the wilds out of Chelan in the 1970s and 80s, pretty much out on 10-day backcountry tours in the wilderness the whole time, maintaining trails and many other tasks. Many fond memories of Lake Chelan, Stehekin, Holden, and everywhere in between. Okay, so thank you for providing that personal information, Gary. I hope you're okay with me sharing that, but I think it's nice to have that background. So I'll tell you what, we're going to go right to Gary's stuff. So not exactly foothills, right? Dumb name for these programs, for these sessions. But this is the photo that Gary gifted us, and it's on our wall now in the house. But hopefully you can see all the amazing landmarks, number one, but also a few of our featured units. In the foreground is the yellow aster gneiss, and that's a very famous gneiss from Northern Europe. It's part of the Chilliwack group. We're still over by Mount Baker. I don't know these places very well, but again, we're looking at the Chilliwack, part of the Alexander story. Aren't these photos amazing? Especially if you're watching from a place that's far, far away from Washington. maybe these photos and nothing else will encourage you to come and visit us. So as we absorb some of these photos, we recognize more and more stuff. There's the Straight Creek Fault, the SCF. And the Chilliwack, we know that. That's yellow on our maps. And there's the Easton, getting up to the top of White Chuck Mountain. Mount Shuckson is full of green schist in the Easton. We don't know about the nascent terrain yet. That's coming. Another look at the gneiss. I think I failed to hammer the idea that the yellow aster is an exciting story, part of the Alexander story, but it's gneiss. It's metamorphic gneiss. I don't think I really got to that part last Sunday. I was so distracted by the crappy technology. Oh my God. Seriously. Is that Scotland? Is that a chunk of Russia? Is that a chunk of Norway? In the area surrounding today's Mount Baker? Oh my goodness. And then skipping to the Easton, I don't think I have spent much time with the Darrington Phyllite, and that's where Gary lives, in Darrington. But here's our first look at some of the green rocks, and you're like, that doesn't look green. Well, there'll be some green rocks coming. And Gary knows that the Straight Creek Fault is a thing, so he's helping us realize that when you visit Cle Elum, Washington, very close to my backyard here, that same Darrington Phyllite, part of the Easton terrain, is on our side of the fence. The only reason for this photo now is to show you Mount Shuckson, which looks like a volcano, doesn't it? But it's not. It's blue schist and green schist all the way to the top of that mountain. It's not a volcano and never was a volcano. That's malachite green, according to Patrick's pencils, that white stuff. Beautiful shot. Oh my God. Gary, I'm not sure where you were here, but I'm guessing you were in the Easton somewhere. Probably west of the Straight Creek Fault is my guess, because that's where a lot of your photos are coming from. God, that is a beautiful photograph. I'm going to be using this one for years to come. Thank you. For today's show, we're talking subduction. No, I gotta back away. This is subduction. Mount Pugh, never heard of it, honestly, until Gary's photos, and now I gotta go up to Mount Pugh. I mean, we're gonna see a lot of this stuff with the video clips. I remind you that so far we are ignoring plutons of all shapes and sizes. And plutons, if you're unaware, are blobs of granite, essentially, that are invading from below. We're ignoring all of them because they screw up the fruitcake. So there will be a session, at least one session, that we're going to look at these plutons. But we're really ignoring them now, and I hope you'll see why in a bit. What? Okay. Thank you, Gary, for that. Now, I'm going to feel bad, but I want to show these photos. Somebody said, I was just up at French Cabin Mountain. Hang on. Is this going to work lighting-wise? So, I think most of Gary's photos were from up here in the green. The rest of this morning is on my side of the Straight Creek Fault. There's my house, here's Cle Elum, and French Cabin Mountain is in the green area of the Cachis Lake inlier. And what else? Yeah, we're just going there, and then we're going to go over to the Ingalls. Ocean floor, subduction zone, even though they're side by side today, correct? No connection between the two. I'm trying to stress that as much as I can. All right, so I'm embarrassed to say, oh, power tools. This is the blue schist / green schist of our area. in the Cochise Lake Inlier. I'll look up your name and thank you next show. But you take beautiful photographs, sir. All I remember from your email is you were up there because you saw one of the installments we did, and then you found another couple and they were lost, and you helped them figure out where they were. But this is all at French Cabin Mountain above Cle Elum. And this is me 3 years ago after Chris Mattinson alerted me that Jamie McDonald led a field trip up here, and he said, you got to go see at this rock. And I think there's volume on this. This is a metamorphic rock called green schist. You can see why. It's a beautiful green rock. And there's exposures of this in Kittitas County up above Lake Cle Elum on this cold, windy, rainy / snowy morning on November 1st. How far do we have to look to find the next exposure of this green schist in Washington? So that's near Cle Elum, Washington. The answer is Burlington Hill. I'm at Burlington, Washington, along Interstate 5, where State Route 20 crosses I-5. I'm almost to Bellingham. I'm 3 hours away from home. And look at beneath the moss, beneath the different botany, is our old friend, the green schist. It's way up here because the Straight Creek Fault has offset this green schist by 100 miles. Okay, so I used that in a lecture that I did a few years ago, and always meant to do more with it, and here we are. So the remaining amount of time we have in the, so thanks to Gary and the unnamed viewer who I will credit next show. The rest is Ned Zinger all the way. I've got 4 clips. The first starting, I'm going to skip around because each of these are more than 30 minutes long, and we don't have time for that. But there's parts of this that I think will be helpful with our discussion here today. So these are all found on my YouTube channel if you want to watch the whole things. This is Nick on the Fly number 7, French Cabin Blue Schist. Let's start it and then skip ahead to two other places. Howdy and welcome to French Cabin Mountain here in central Washington. You know what's up here, besides a bunch of trees and beautiful scenery? There's a bunch of green schist and blue schist, which are metamorphic rocks that tell a very specific story about the early days of Washington. Metamorphic rocks today, the Easton Metamorphic Suite. All right. And a couple of key gee whiz things about this particular. Show us some bedrock. Thanks for joining us. This is a place where the blue schist is in place. It has not been moved. And yet if we pan over and look carefully at some of the details, we'll get our first real close look at some of this. There's green, there's some blues. Good looking. Good looking stuff. Okay, so if you're curious where this is, oh, I should do it now. So this is the field guide number 49 from the big National Geological Society of America meeting that was held in Seattle in October of 2017. And this is the main help that I've been using the last 3 years. Jamie McDonald, again, the guy from Florida, and there's a whole team of people, including Bob Miller, who's part of that research team that I'm involved with starting next summer. But much of what I'm sharing with you today is coming from this paper. I used our colors and the Straight Creek Fault, and we're now down at these inliers, and French Cabin Mountain is here, but I actually want to show you the Forest Service road. Like a moron, I used the red marker on the back of this, so it's bleeding through the other side. That was dumb. But if you know Lake Cle Elum and Lake Cochise, this is the ridge between Cle Elum and Cochise, and Forest Service Road 4308, which crosses, you get to the north end of Lake Cle Elum, get on 4308 and just follow it all the way up, all the way up. And what's in green here is the Easton, but here's our little window of Chilliwack that should be yellow if I could color it yellow. But I'm up here. French Cabin Mountain is up there. While I'm at it, there's more. Here's Cle Elum, Washington. This is Forest Service Road. I can't read backwards, whatever that number says. 4510, is that what it says? So gravel road coming out of South Cle Elum and going up. And Pio Point is not the green schist and the blue schist, but you can get in, look at how much Easton is just south of I-90, although the exposure is not particularly great. And then I got you here. We're eventually, before I run out of battery on the phone, going to the Ingalls. And the Ingalls, this is all in that same article by Jamie. Blewett Pass and US 97, if you happen to know the area, you're driving right through where it's real gnarly, and in snow it's very dangerous. On the north side of Blewett on US 97, you're going through serpentinite the whole way, and that ophiolite sequence. Okay, back to the Easton. Trying to, you know, grab one other segment here, maybe two others. You gotta get that out of your head. It's so crazy. All right, let me come in. Let me come in, boss. French Cabin Mountain. Okay. You think we can lift it?
No. You want me to try?
No, I don't know. Hi-ya.
Oh, this is just so cool.
I missed the spot.
I'm picking up the greens as well as the blues.
I had no idea what I'm looking at, by the way, at the time.
Water girl.
Here.
Just kind of on this face, how about?
How close can I get?
How close can you get? Without falling. Oh, oh baby, oh baby. Oh, damn. Sorry, Patrick. Ah, that brings it to life. Just add water. So the details have been studied here, the fabric.
Okay, we're leaving the Easton. That's enough. I got 3 segments from the Ingalls. You know, I'm not going to go get the map again. Moss green, ophiolite, ocean floor, just south of the Stewart Range. And I did this one in early July before I bought these wireless mics. But I just want to give you a sense of the setting of finding this deep ocean floor in a completely non-oceanic setting.
Kind of wanted to find some weathered stuff for you too. I guess we'll start with the fresh looking stuff. The sun's out right at the moment.
Serpentinite.
So can you notice a green color?
Doy.
Can you notice that it's kind of waxy?
Yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I continued hiking up the trail. This is the Beverly Creek. Oh, I cut myself. Beverly Creek Trail south of Stewart Range. We haven't talked about the Stewart Range yet. We haven't talked. That's a pluton. We haven't talked about granitic stuff at all yet. But the scenery's kind of nice, and I'm showing you this to give you a sense of how much of this Ingalls is up there. It's a lot of green rock that weathers to a very deep orange. I had Gizmo. Oh yeah, let me the wind noise is bad because I didn't have the mics yet, but I just want to narrate. So I'm hiking up to Earl Peak from the Beverly Turnpike side, which is kind of the backside. So I like it up there because there's not as many people typically. And so it's fun to see what Gizmo can capture, number one. But number two, everything you're looking at is Ingalls. It's all serpentinite. And you're like, really? That doesn't look green. Well, look carefully in the foreground. Can you see that the fresh look of these rocks is green, is ocean floor rock, but then there's so much iron and other chemistry that I don't understand. A lot of that kind of jumbled brownish, orangish stuff, tannish stuff is also the same rock. So we're looking north across to the Stewart Range, but there, to the right, that's all Ingalls. It's all serpentinite. And you know, I'm 58 years old. I'm 275. I'm not in nearly the shape that I used to be, but this is doable for me. So if it's doable for me, I think it's probably doable for you. This is after about 3 hours of hiking. It's accessible to many of you. Beverly, Earl Peak, like the name Earl, E-A-R-L. So again, I'm calling this the Foothills Show. What am I doing? This is not foothills. And yet, the Ingalls is on display. I'm going to turn the volume back on. Oh, this is not bad. We'll have the wind whistle for you a little bit. Brown to green in the foreground, serpentinite. Stewart Range in the backside, granite. Windy Pass thrust in the distance. Liz and Corey were supposed to meet me up there, and they didn't show, so there was a miscommunication. So Daddy was pissed when I was filming this. TMI. How could you be pissed up in a place like that? Good question. Okay, we got more. Almost 10:30. I don't care. Let me show you that piece that I showed you that I have in the backyard here when I found it on the trail. Oh no, that's not it. Sorry, we're leaving that. More Ingalls. Now we're right off of US 97, north of Blewett Pass. If you know that drive, north of Blewett on US 97, you cross this every frickin' time.
Hey folks, and welcome. This is some very interesting rock here north of Blewett Pass, right along US 97. It's kind of a busy place, but it's a relatively quiet Tuesday morning. I think you can see this is rock worth stopping and looking at, wouldn't you say? This is part of the Ingalls exotic terrain, another Mesozoic terrain, Another day, another postage stamp to look at this Mesozoic basement of central Washington. And this outcrop here, I've never stopped at before, driven by hundreds of times.
I get impatient with myself. Imagine what you must feel like. Look at how chaotic it is. Remember, we're down in that serpentinite matrix with all those blocks of things. It's like a melange. I shouldn't say it, but I guess I'm going to. Wasn't the Bell Pass melange full of dunite and other stuff? Is there a chance? No, stop. Forget I said that. Ingalls, ocean floor, gizmo shadow. Still along US 97. Let me show you one more segment and then we'll finish.
Horizontal, so they've been
I'm showing the Jamie thing before I colored it.
crammed on to the edge of former North.
Yeah, some of the looks of these really screwed up rocks, pretty interesting.
Of the Ingalls terrain that was intruded by the Stuart granodiorite.
Yeah, that's coming.
So just kind of take a look at this and see how grungy it is, how much this rock has been beaten up.
I have no idea what we're looking at here. What the H? Okay. The last thing I'm going to show you in the Cozy Fort, and then we'll go to some questions and answers if you still have them. This is the field report template that I was suggesting that other field reporters use. And I've received a number of field reports. I'm hanging on to most of them till later. But this is back to that Beverly Creek Trail in early October. We'll watch this whole thing. It's almost 3 minutes. 2 minutes and 54 seconds.
Hey everybody, this is your field correspondent, Ned Zinger. Today reporting from the Beverly Turnpike Trail, south of Mount Stewart and the Mount Stewart batholith. I'm sitting in Beverly Creek. It's dry this time of year. It's almost October. But all of the rocks here are one kind of green ocean rock. So everything in this creek bed is green. Kind of waxy in places. Okay, in Marley's book, Marley and Daryl's book, page 134, here's Mount Stewart and the Stewart Range batholith. Leavenworth, Washington is to the north, and I'm in this country down here, which is a ridge that's not this Mount Stewart batholith, but instead it's the Ingalls terrain. On a map, here's Ellensburg, Blewett Pass.
Wrong color for us.
I'm in the purple here, and the pink is the Stewart batholith. So I'm kind of off to the map just a little bit, but I'm in this purple area that Marley's calling the Ingalls complex. will feel like.
This is all right along Beverly Creek. It's such a peaceful place. And that whole mountain is full of serpentinite. You can see much of it has weathered to the kind of brown or to the orange.
Too many geology, too many geology. Oh yeah, Ingalls terrain.
Okay, it's time for some live Q&A.
66 million years ago.
That was a long session in the Cozy Fort, but hopefully you see the benefit of showing some of those clips. It hasn't exactly warmed up. Okay, I have 40% battery on the laptop. Who knows about the phone, but I think we're good. And I know you'll have suggestions on how to extend my battery, but I've already commented on that. Oh, wait, I don't have... Oh, I closed our... I got to find our session here. Hang on. By the way, I've heard from some of you, like, I can't find the live link or whatever. I can't join you live. Like, I have to... I don't know how to do it. Well, I don't know if you're aware, but if you hit subscribe to this YouTube channel, it doesn't cost you any money. Are you aware of that? Like, you don't have to go get your checkbook or something. It's free. But the reason you would hit subscribe and then maybe subscribe to 2 or 3 other YouTube channels that you like is that you can have a feed of your YouTube channels that you subscribe to. And as you scroll down your YouTube feed, you can easily find these live links. So that's a little tip for you. Okay. Popping the chat out like a boss. Let's see what you're interested in wanting to talk about, and then we'll call it a day. Scrolling back, I'm looking for some uppercase. Ivana, the savant from Brooklyn. What does Nooksat correlate to in BC? I'm going to try to do a little bit with the Harrison area, Ivana, but I think I need Jerome to help me a little bit, and I don't know much more than that. But when we go north of that thrust fault, that Vetter thrust fault, I think we're going to find more Nooksack related stuff. Jeff from Vinman's Bakery, you got to love it. Everywhere on the earth, does green rock always indicate the rock was formed under or with water? I think so, Jeff. I can't think of common green rocks that are not an oceanic story. I'm guessing I'll get corrected on that by a few, but especially here, anytime you're out hiking or you have a green rock in your front yard from the previous owner or whatever, that's from the ocean. Patrick, age 7, is the thrust fault that crosses the Straight Creek Fault still active? Was it active while the Straight Creek Fault was active? Is that why some things are covered up at the piercing point? Patrick, age 7. Thanks for the questions, Patrick. The thrust fault is not active anymore. It's difficult to get an age window on the thrusting, Patrick. And in fact, all those pizza boxes with all those thrust stacks, you notice we haven't spent any time talking about the timing of those pizza boxes thrusting up and the geometry of the naps. there's not a coherent story that I can find from the work that's been done. So we're just knowing that we have these naps that are stacked up. We know there's a thrust fault between each, Patrick, and we don't have a good sense of the timing, except now that I say that, wasn't there the message 100 to 84 million years was Darrell Cowan's group with the pizza boxes thrusting, and didn't Ned Brown's group extend that earlier to like 115 million years until about 85 million years? But I don't know how our thrust of today fits into that, if it does at all. But it's a major feature, and I'm going to try to learn more about it. Thank you, Patrick. Dick, why are scientists so sure the Straight Creek Fault slipped 20 feet each earthquake when the quakes occurred 50 to 35 million years ago? Thank you, Dick. That's my choice to present it that way. On average, when the San Andreas Fault makes a big earthquake, on average, there's 20 feet of lateral movement on the San Andreas Fault in our modern times. And as a teacher, I'm just trying to give us a sense of 20 feet of movement each time we have an earthquake, but we have no way to document that. So it could be there was more than 20 feet of lateral offset on the Straight Creek each earthquake, or 5 feet per quake. We don't know that. That's just me trying to give a sense of the concept. Positive power. Any trace of manganese nodules in the serpentinite? Could be. I don't know. Kathy. Harry. Okay, now we're talking to each other. Claire says, thanks for a most interesting lesson in Liverpool. I'm still into Paul McCartney lately, so I'm thinking about Liverpool a lot. Marbles collector, was the Ingalls Formation once an accretionary wedge at a subduction zone? Yeah, I struggle with that. Thank you. The main teaching message was that the ophiolite is the main message from the Ingalls, and that is not a subduction story. However, I need to learn more about serpentinite that's in a melange. I think for now, we're not talking about an accretionary wedge at all with the Ingalls, but I may back off of that when I learn more. I'm trying to decide how much to involve California geology in this series, by the way, and in December we might be down at the Franciscan complex, and I might have a different tune, so thanks for that. Cat Slave 56 wants to know about Oregon. Hang with me, would you? I don't want to reveal too much. I want to kind of keep it kind of a secret. That was a dumb way to say that. I have a plan. In November, we're looking at these different terrains here in Washington, and then December, we're going to go back to the entire Alaska to Mexico scene and try to make some connections. So I like that you want to go down to Oregon right now and make some connections, but I don't think I want to do that quite yet. Automatic scroll. Let's do a few more. Oscar, hey, San Diego, thanks for all the help. I just ordered those lights. What causes the difference in color between blue and green schist? What did Chris say? Is glaucophane a blue mineral? I think it might be. And so if there's a bunch of glaucophane, then it's more blue than it is green. So what? Well, glaucophane, each metamorphic mineral has a certain temperature and pressure condition that it thrives in. I do know that much. So what were the story of those schists? They were low temperature but high pressure, I believe. So if you just imagine, remember that thermometer that Chris had? But it's more of a pressure thing, like in a pressure cooker. You keep cranking up the pressure, you're going to develop new metamorphic minerals that are adapting to those new pressure conditions. So that's one of the uses of looking at all these detailed minerals inside of these rocks, because we know through experimentation in modern laboratories exactly what the temperature and pressure conditions are necessary to create that certain mineral. And so if you see a blue schist with a bunch of glaucophane, I hope that's right, then we know the former low temperature, high pressure condition. All related to a subduction zone. Two more. The device 9, on the Ingalls video where you see more greenish color on the far mountain, is that less weathered serpentinite and the foreground is reddish weathered stuff? If so, why is the mountainside more fresh? Thank you. There's a lot of landslides up there. So that's one way to expose, I think of it like this. I think of if you've got a ridge full of serpentinite, which you do at Earl Peak or Longs Pass or hiking over to Ingalls Lake, if you know any of those places. This is the kind of secondary ridge just south of Ingalls Creek. I know I'm talking locally now, but whatever. Ingalls, Longs, Earl, and so on. I think of the whole ridge as being made out of green serpentinite, and I think of inside of the ridge as truly green. I think of the ridge as being made out of this stuff, and it is. But at the very outside of the ridge, where the ridge is exposed to the snow, it's snowing up there this morning, you alter the green to this orange. So the weathered look is the orange. Well, if you have a big landslide, or if you have some debris flow, or if you have, I don't know, some small fault that makes an earthquake and exposes, if you can somehow expose the inside of that green ridge, it's going to look green. So I think that, in a general sense, explains why you saw certain faces that were green in the video and some of them were more brown and orange. Let's find one to finish on. We're not going to finish on this, but I think you're catching me here. Mark Smith says, ocean floor serpentinite versus subduction serpentinite. Yeah, I'm realizing I'm getting caught here. Serpentinite is in both situations. So I think just in hand sample, I don't think you can say, well, this is serpentinite from a subduction zone, and this is serpentinite from an ocean floor. It looks like the same stuff, but I'm not backing away. I'm not backing away from this, but I am going to agree with you that serpentinite is part of a subduction story, and I think I'm just focusing on, yes, there's serpentinite in both pictures, and the serpentinite itself looks identical in both pictures, but it's the context of where we find the serpentinite. Is it within a zone of an ophiolite sequence, or is it in a jumbled mess with the rest of these schists? I guess that's the way to say it. But I'm going to continue to think about that. Thank you. Toughen up. Are the shiny surfaces in your hand samples slickensides? I kind of asked that out loud in that Ingalls show, that Nick on the Fly right along US 97. And in the literature, some of these do have grooves, and some of them are interpreted as fault planes. So slickensides are grooved, smooth surfaces that represent where you have an actual fault surface, fault plane, where there were earthquakes recently. But in the serpentine and the serpentinite, there's a lot of those surfaces. I don't think they're all slickensides. Last question. What stopped the Straight Creek Fault from moving? By the time we're done with this show, we're gonna finish with a bang. Episode Z will be an event at 50 million years ago that's going to help explain why the Straight Creek Fault began and why it stopped. Cliffhanger. A toast to you. Here's to the green schist / blue schist of the French Cabin Creek area between Lake Cle Elum and Lake Cochise. Here's to you and your health, not only today, not only the past week, but weeks to come. Here's to the health of your family and your friends and everyone in your life that is important to you, and even people who are not important to you. Here's to strangers. Is it possible this is the second show in a row that we didn't have major technical problems? Is it possible me saying that right now means that I will have problems next Friday? I don't know. There goes my wife. She thought we were done for sure. We're not done, but we are now. Thank you for tuning in. I love you. We'll see you next Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. What's the topic? I don't know, but I'll figure it out by then. Have a good week. We'll see you on Friday. Goodbye.